Well, happy election day? I'm not quite sure. To be honest, I'm pre-recording this on Tuesday, so I don't actually know what's happened overnight. So I am recording this daily winter warmer devotion in faith, in a way. I'm assuming, like me, you've probably ended up staying up quite late last night to see what happened in the election, or maybe you got up early this morning to find out what's happening in the election. And although it is an election in America, which on one level has nothing to do with us, it's probably an election that is covered in our news this morning and we are all thinking about. Now here's the question, why? Why in the UK, in Wales, in Abergavenny, are we thinking about the United States of America? Well, on the one hand, there's the old saying, isn't there, that when America sneezes, we catch a cold. So there is a sense in which America, because it's such a large country and a powerful country, does affect us. Also, the President of the United States of America, whomever that is known as the leader of the free world. And because they have so much power, they have political power around the world. So really, America does affect us. But I find it interesting, thinking over the last few days about the American election, how it is yet another thing in our life that is out of our control that will affect us. Another thing that is out of our control that will affect us. So let me tell you the three things that at the moment we are completely out of control of: politics, pandemic, and personal circumstances. Those three things are completely out of control. We can't influence politics. We haven't got that kind of power. The pandemic, it doesn't matter how hard we use the language of defeat or control, there's nothing that we seem to be able to do at the moment. And what is most frustrating, I think, for us is really we have no control over our personal circumstances. So for some of us, over the last 2 weeks of the fire break, have not been able to see loved ones. Some of us would dearly love to do certain things and we just can't do it. This is an incredibly unsettling and upsetting time, because we're out of control. And so today, everywhere I speak today on Wednesday, I want to be sharing the same book of the Bible, and it's Isaiah. Isaiah was written in a time when kings and queens came and went. There was always political upheaval. People didn't last long. And in those days, really, the quality of your life was bound up with a king, with a person in power. Now, Isaiah, he kind of was a prophet for about the reigns of 4 different kings. So he saw a lot of elections and a lot of punditry. And it's interesting that in one of the transitions of power, in one of the kind of changes, we get that most famous of passages, Isaiah chapter 6. Let me just remind you of how Isaiah chapter 6 begins. It says this: "In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord, high and exalted, seated on a throne, and the train of his robe filled the temple." I love that. What is it saying? That passage is saying that actually there is a higher throne. And that throne is so high and so great that all we can see is the train of his robe. I don't know if you've ever thought of that. The vision that Isaiah had was merely the train of his robe, and it filled the temple. Yes, the Bible wants us to pray for leaders. Yes, the Bible wants us to obey leaders. But the Bible also tells us that there is a greater leader, a greater authority. So whilst leaders come and go, for Isaiah, the Lord never changes. He is unchanging. He is always the creator who is constant, who loves us and lavishes his grace upon us. And so later on in Isaiah chapter 40, we have these amazing words where it says this: "Surely the nations are like a drop in a bucket. They are regarded as dust on the scales. He weighs the islands as though they were fine dust." Really, Isaiah is unpacking for God as a prophet of God to us that, look, God is so much bigger that actually the nations, even America, is but just a little bit of grain in a bucket. Today, of all days, and in this season of politics, pandemics, and personal circumstances being out of our control, we need to remember that God is on his throne. And now, what I want you to get is this. The train of the robe that we see in the temple, who did Isaiah have a vision of? It was God, yes, but it was Jesus, wasn't it? Jesus said that he was Isaiah's vision. And you see, what is our God like? The train of the robe of the Lord Jesus, seated in majesty in heaven. What kind of leader is he? You see, we have a king ultimately who is not just greater in power, but is greater in character. Not just greater in power, he is greater in character. To zoom forward with me to Isaiah chapter 53, so we can remember the king that we have. Surely he took up our pain and bore our sufferings. Yet we considered him punished by God, stricken by him and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him, and by his wounds we have been healed. Brothers, sisters, here's my winter warmer for you today. Whatever's happening in politics, whatever's happening in the pandemic, whatever's happening in your personal circumstance, there is a higher throne. God is on his throne and he is unchanging. No one can usurp him. There is no way he's coming off his throne. But God did come into our world. The Lord Jesus gave up his glory, laid it aside so that he could die in our place. That is our King, unchanging, completely lavish in his love. So today, whilst everything seems out of control, remember that our God is in complete control.